What if Billy Bragg formed an electro-pop duo with Vince Clarke? This week we'll be celebrating two figures who emerged into Britain's post-punk musical landscape and revitalised the pop scene, albeit in radically different ways. One as a folk-punk poet and one as an electronic innovator. All that and more on this week's What If, How, When, Why. Hi, my name is Morgan Brown, and each Monday I upload a new What If video to my YouTube channel, and then on Wednesdays follow it with one of these companion videos where I discuss the artists and genres involved in the What If video, and also share some insights into my creative process. The idea of the What If videos is that every week I pick a popular song and imagine an alternative universe in which some change of circumstances causes that song to come out completely different from the version we know and love. I then take the original lead vocal of that song and record a new backing track to it using just GarageBand and whatever instruments I happen to have to hand in order to bring that alternative version of the song to life. So the song I picked this week was To Have and To Have Not by Billy Bragg, and I tried to reimagine that as a Vince Clarke-style electro-pop track. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that yet, here's a little taster. Although I've been deeply immersed in punk rock stuff since my early teen years really, it took me a little while to catch on to Billy Bragg. I think maybe I heard a couple of his songs earlier on when I was into metal and they just didn't resonate with me. Maybe the minimalism or the lack of rock and roll posturing at the time just didn't appeal to me. So I sort of wrote him off a little bit, and it was only kind of quite a few years into being into punk that I picked up a record by Discount. I don't know if you remember Discount, great sort of melodic punk band out of Florida, fronted by Alison Mosshart, who later became a lot more famous for fronting The Kills and The Dead Weather. But I got quite into this band, and they released an EP called Discount Love Billy, entirely of Billy Bragg songs, and I thought, well, I don't know if I like Billy Bragg, but I do enjoy Discount, so I'll enjoy the sound of the band, whatever the songs are like. So I picked it up and gave it a go, and very quickly realised that I'd made a massive mistake in sort of writing Billy Bragg off, because I mean, the band sounded fantastic as expected, but the songs were amazing. So witty and powerful, but also really big-hearted and full of pathos. Just incredible songs. I think that there's a load of classics on there. Accident Waiting to Happen, Waiting for the Great Leap Forward, Help Save the Youth of America. All these songs just blew my mind. So at that point I realised I really needed to go and get some actual Billy Bragg records to listen to. And before he became this sort of punk poet with this minimal guitar and vocal presentation, which is what he became mainly known for, he did actually start out in a much more conventional band setting as a member of Riff Raff, who were a pretty cool, actually, punk rock band with like a hint of pub rock as well, but really tuneful and catchy and fun. And they were signed to Chiswick Records for a little bit in the late 70s, but never really took off. So I guess once that kind of fizzled out, Billy was at least temporarily disillusioned with music, kind of dropped it altogether to go and join the army. Fairly soon after joining the army, he realised he'd made a terrible mistake and had to sort of extricate himself from that. And then instead of forming a new band, took to just busking, concentrating on writing songs, and trying to get his songs performed by other people as well. So he made a demo tape of himself just performing some of the songs solo to try and ship to record companies in the hope of getting other people to record them. Didn't have much luck with that, but somehow his tape found its way to someone from Chrysalis Records, who at the time were looking to start a new sub-label called Utility. I think they heard this minimal sound that still owed something to punk, but also owed something to folk, and these really strong, stark, powerful songs, and thought, never mind giving these songs to other people, let's just record this. So basically got him in a room, just putting these songs down directly onto tape with no recording shenanigans whatsoever. Just the sound that you hear on the tape is the sound that he was making in the room. Electric guitar, vocal, and nothing else. And that became the Life's a Riot with the Spy vs. Spy mini album, which not only really announced his identity, but pretty much encapsulated everything that's great about him in one short 7-song record. It's got that stark, down-to-earth delivery. The songs can be pointed and sharp, and they can pack a powerful political punch, but they can also be quite tender and emotive as well. And if he'd never recorded anything else, I mean, that would have been the template for so much music that's followed. The entire folk punk movement owes a hefty debt of gratitude to Billy Bragg, but also just the broader punk and indie scenes. So many people have definitely taken a few cues from him over the years. So he really just established his whole style on that one record. And then, although sonically things have evolved in different directions ever since, he's never really wavered from writing these big-hearted but really smart and sharp songs that were showcased on that first record. So as the years go on, you get slightly more elaborate arrangements coming in. I think towards the end of the 80s, he acquires the Blokes, his backing band, and you start to get some sort of full band arrangements of things again. Makes the great Mermaid Avenue series with Wilco and Natalie Merchant, where they collaborated to make new musical settings for a bunch of unused Woody Guthrie lyrics, and those are fantastic records. So really rich musical output over the years, but also is made a significant impact on a broader cultural level. I mean, with his writing, I greatly enjoyed his book about the British skiffle scene, which is a fantastic read, just beautifully researched account of this often overlooked British music scene that was the catalyst for so much of what came afterwards. But also he's written about politics. He's been a pretty major figure on the British left, advocating against fascism and curating like the left field stage at Glastonbury, which has given a platform to so many left-leaning political artists who otherwise wouldn't have got anything like that kind of level of exposure. So yeah, a really important figure, and I think one who it's really easy for people to underrate. I often go back to him, and I think particularly in this day and age where everything is so alarmingly overproduced and where technology threatens to kind of swallow up all music, being able to just put on a record and hear the power of just a human being with a guitar recorded direct to tape is really fantastic. So for that reason, I absolutely celebrate Billy Bragg. At the same time that Billy Bragg was in Riff Raff and trying to cut his teeth on the punk rock scene, Vince Clarke was actually getting a pretty similar start in music. I think his bands lent a little bit more on the new wavy side of things, but like Billy Bragg, started out playing guitar in bands. Certainly had a band called The Plan, who I think were very much along the lines of the John Fox era Ultravox kind of sound, so that sort of new wavy post-punk sound. But then when that fizzled out, instead of either just carrying on trying to plug away in conventional bands or taking the Billy Bragg route and going for pared down minimalism, he went in a different direction and really leaned into the technological side of things. I guess around that time, a few bands who'd come out of the new wave were really starting to explore the possibilities that technology offered. And I think he was also really influenced by the work that Sparks had done in the late 70s with Giorgio Moroder, which in many ways sort of set the template for what a modern electro-pop band could be, jettisoning the idea that you needed a drummer and a bass player and a guitarist. You could just have a singer and a guy with some synths. So he really took that cue and kind of ran with it through the 80s. First with Depeche Mode, of which he was a founder member, wrote those early hits, but then split with them after the first album, allowing them to go off and pursue their sort of darker side on their subsequent stuff. From there, he forms Yazoo with Alison Moyet, who took that cool sort of electronic sound that he'd established with Depeche Mode and added this layer of warm soulfulness from Alison Moyet's voice, which really resonated with the public. And that was a fantastic project, and I think showed that electropop could be more broadly accessible rather than the sort of slightly niche, slightly nerdy post-punk audience that it had previously mainly appealed to. And obviously Alison Moyet moves on to a solo career, and Vince Clarke is on the move again, figuring out what else to do. Had a couple of years where he was doing various little projects, made a great one-off single as The Assembly with Fergal Sharkey on lead vocals, which is fantastic, but then eventually formed Erasure, which is the project for which he's justifiably best known. And like Yazoo, it's a duo, but this time pairing Vince Clarke with Andy Bell, and somehow it just created the perfect chemistry between Vince's very reserved, cool character and Andy Bell's extrovert flamboyance. And they've just had a spectacular career, truly one of the great British pop acts. They just really honed and perfected that electro-pop sound as a mainstream commodity and had several years of like absolute chart dominance. And even now, years after their chart peak, whenever they do release something, they still do well. Their albums still chart. And I don't think it's unfair to say that every subsequent generation of electronic acts owes a massive debt of gratitude to Vince Clarke, because all of those acts, Depeche Mode, Yazoo and Erasure, completely shaped people's perception of what electronic pop music could be. And every time a modern pop star puts out a new record with retro synth sounds in, you can absolutely guarantee there'll be something in there that harks back to something that Vince Clarke did 30 or 40 years earlier. So yeah, like Billy Bragg, another unassuming British pop great whose relatively mild-mannered demeanour belies his towering influence, I think. But yeah, anyway, that leads me to this week's alternative universe scenario. So in my alternate timeline this week, it's 1983, and we find Vince Clarke in between projects. Yazoo's just split up, and he's trying to figure out what direction to go in next. He's thinking about the idea of doing something with the Assembly, which they've been talking about, but he's not totally sold on that idea yet. And just as he's contemplating his next move, a friend passes along to him a cassette of a demo that arrived on their desk, apparently from this young singer-songwriter who's been pushing his work. And the friend's like, yeah, I'm not sure who this is, but I just thought you might be interested to hear it, see if it's got anything that you think you could do anything with. And he gives it a listen. He's immediately struck by the stark power of this recording, these songs that have this polemic political edge but also have real emotional substance too. And of course the demo is from Billy Bragg, who's just trying to figure out how to get some kind of footing in the music industry. So Vince Clarke reaches out to him and says, I know you've just been trying to make it as a songwriter, but how would you feel about joining up as a duo and performing with me? And Billy Bragg thinks this is wonderful. He's a big fan of Vince Clarke's earlier work, jumps at the chance to get involved. So they start working together. Their first single is this electro-pop imagining of Billy's song To Have and To Have Not, which is this powerful state of the nation comment on the terrible situation with youth unemployment in the country. And they managed to release it just as the UK's in the run-up to a general election. And it becomes an anthem for young people across the country. It really gets people fired up about the situation in the nation and helps to foment a popular left-wing movement amongst British young people. So the election comes round and the Labour Party wins and Thatcherism is defeated forever. And as people celebrate, they sing To Have and To Have Not on the streets, marking its status as a left-wing anthem for Britain's youth. Well, you know, wishful thinking, eh? But yeah, in attempting to transform this song from a minimalist kind of folk punk song into an electro-pop song, the first step as ever is just to get an isolated vocal track, drop it into GarageBand and sync it up to the grid. Couldn't find a nice, clean, isolated track because obviously I think it was recorded completely live, so it's been isolated with a stem splitter, so a bit noisy, a bit of a kind of crappy, thin sounding vocal track. Unfortunately, there wasn't that much you could do with it. First thing I did then was add some drums on, trying for a really good early to mid 80s drum machine sound, that kind of very artificial drum machine sound. So I set that up as my main drum pattern, just got a fairly simple pattern that loops round all the way through with only a couple of minor variations. And then to add a little bit of variety to that and also a few fills, I added a second drum machine with a different, slightly more bombastic sound, just to do some kind of tom fills and add some accents here and there as well, just to thicken up the rhythm in places. Wanted some bass sounds on there next, so I've got two different synth basses. I've got an arpeggiated one that's got this sort of Italian disco kind of pulse going all the way through, and then a second sound that just reinforces the kick drum rhythm and just reinforces the chord changes as well. Next thing, I wanted to add various sort of chordal textures. So I've done that with a few things. There's another arpeggiator pattern, which is just bubbling around the chords there, keeping the energy up with this constantly shifting sort of pattern. Got a couple of different pluck sounds in there, which I think always sound pretty cool. So they, again, reinforce the chord change, but also serve a nice rhythmic purpose as well. They can lock in with the drums and stuff. I think I had a bell sound in there, playing some chordal stuff just to add a bit of a higher, more delicate texture to that sort of chordal makeup as well. And then, although I was obviously keeping things mainly synth-based, I did add just one guitar. I noted, particularly on a bunch of the Erasure stuff, Vince Clarke likes to occasionally add just a bit of acoustic in there. Not always all the way through, but just to add some accents in certain places and a bit of an extra texture. So I tried to do some of that too. I figured in this duo it would give Billy Bragg something to do with his hands while he's also singing. And then on top of that, I just added a few melodic lines and things. So we've got some synth strings, not doing anything terribly complex, but playing some long lines that weave across the track, which makes things feel a little bit more emotive, a little bit more epic. And we've also got this kind of a lo-fi piano sound and another sort of bell sound that chime in on either side in harmony with each other, just playing a little melodic motif as well, which I thought just added something, just a bit more detail to catch your ear as the song's going along. Then for the video, I started out as ever by just finding some footage of Billy singing the song back in the day and sing that up to the track. It's a really funny performance from some mad open air festival where the stage is in front of, I think, a horse track, so you can occasionally see just horses zipping by in front of the stage, which is very odd. I don't know what that was all about, but it's a cool performance. So we sing Billy up, needed to get some footage of Vince then, so found an old performance of Yazoo doing Only You on some European TV show. So just clipped Vince out of that and merged him in with Billy, so, you know, they're on there together. And then I wasn't sure what else to put in. I thought just to go along with the theme of the song and to set some like mid-80s atmosphere, I would hunt out some documentary footage about 80s unemployment, and I kind of hit the jackpot with this little documentary about unemployment in Birkenhead at the time. Bleak stuff. A situation not entirely unlike the situation we're rapidly heading into now, but it absolutely kind of fits with the theme of the song, so I thought that would go nicely. So just crowbarred some of that in as well to complete the picture, and I think that kind of rounded it off quite nicely. So I hope you enjoyed this one. This was a request, I should have said earlier, actually, from my old mate Leo, who suggested a few things in the past, and I thought this was a great suggestion. Sorry it's taken me a while to get around to it, but love Billy Bragg. Love that old electro-pop sound, so it was really good fun trying to put the two things together. I'm not at all convinced that I really captured a Vince Clarke sound, but I certainly had a great time trying to do that. Let me know what you think down in the comments anyway, and if you did enjoy, please like, share, subscribe, all that stuff is always a massive help to me. If there's anything else you'd like me to do in coming weeks and months, any artists, songs or genres you'd like me to investigate, do let me know. Your suggestions are always most welcome. Otherwise, that's all from me for this week, so thanks very much indeed for watching, and I'll hope to see you next time.